Earlier I spoke to Amna Nawaz, a fellow for the International Reporting Project, who just recently returned from assignment in Pakistan. I asked her how much hope there is that this aid money will be spent wisely.
Well, I think among the people on the ground, there's a great deal of optimism. I mean, the aid agency workers and the development workers are terribly optimistic, especially the ones I spoke to, that the work that they're doing is going to have some kind of impact. That said, a lot of people I spoke with as well, in terms of the general public, military officials and intelligence officials, are worried that, $1.5 billion in the grand scheme of things is not that much money. And if you're talking about $1.5 billion a year, it's maybe a percentage of GDP for what Pakistan deals with. It's just a small percentage.
So what sort of numbers are they talking about?
Well, I don't think they're even talking about what they need. I think they're just talking about what exactly are they agreeing to. $1.5 billion a year is certainly a significant increase in terms of what's been going from the U.S. to Pakistan. And most people will readily agree that this is a gesture, its intention is good, and they recognize it as such. But I think they're worried about when, in a place where the need is so great, where there's so much need for health projects and infrastructure and agricultural, that $1.5 billion a year, when it actually hits the ground, may not have the kind of impact the U.S. government thinks it could.
And having had the experience that you've had in trying to implement a development project, what sort of problems might be faced?
Well, security is a major problem. And it seems to be that until the security situation is straightened out, the development work in its execution won't really have as much of an impact. The one project that I was focusing on was an agricultural development project. Now, agriculture is a huge part of Pakistan's GDP. It's over half of their unemployment in the country. The funding is there, the expertise is there, but in this one specific project I was following, they couldn't even go to half of the areas that they needed to go to.
But who would, again, which area was this, and who would be trying, in whose interest would it be to scupper the project that you were working on?
Well, it's not even specifically that there is one specific threat to this project. I mean, there are situations in which aid agencies and development workers are targeted, if you look at the World Food Program office bombing. But in terms of just general security and instability, if you're looking at the areas that need the development most, like the Northwest Frontier Province, like Fatah, which is where much of this one project I was focusing on is based, those areas aren't safe to go to if you're just traveling up and down on your own on a regular basis. And more often than not, plans would be made to go, to visit, to implement plans, to keep sort of progress moving on the plans, and they couldn't go just because of general insecurity or instability.
But might it not help then, though, for these to be much more locally based? One of the conditionalities of this money is it will be funneled through the US channels. Doesn't that then therefore give it an imprimatur which makes it a target? Isn't there an example then to have much more of a local input and to sort of solve some of these security issues?
And I think that seems to be some of the discussion, that perhaps working with local government, for instance the Northwest Frontier Province government, to implement plans where they see fit and to dole the money out as they see fit.
But this 1.5 a year, 1.5 billion appears though not to be like that. I mean, it appears to have its starting point in the US, and that's one of the reasons why there's so much anger.
And that may be that on the ground it's sort of perceived as this is U.S. money coming from the U.S. and it's in a time of growing anti-Americanism, any project associated with it may be at risk.
Amna Nawaz, a fellow with the International Reporting Project.